All right, Mark Rogers TV talking ACC Media Days. We talked with Josh Parcell here, bring him in, formerly of ESPN, college football writer and personality who took in the festivities in Charlotte. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing well. 2 full days of ACC talk has me very excited for the season. We're only a month and a half away, so can't wait to get started, and it's all I can think about right now.
Yeah, when it comes to all the hype and the hubbub of media days, the SEC has been basically the gold standard. Even though they may not necessarily be that on the field, they continue to be the gold standard when it comes to media days, and they've got their own network, and the ACC not far behind, and that's going to be a huge coup for this conference. Just before we dive into the teams, just the overall feel of the event. We don't hear as much about it. What's the vibe and the atmosphere like?
To me, this was the biggest ACC kickoff I've ever seen, and a lot of that is because Clemson is the national champion. Louisville has the Heisman Trophy winner. Florida State is obviously a preseason top 2 or 3 team. So there's just a ton of attention, a ton of buzz. It was a very palpable energy inside the building. It's not what the SEC media days are because you don't have fans trickling around the lobby. It's not that much of an event yet. But you could feel a new sense of confidence that the ACC has, and it's led by those 2 or 3 programs really out at the forefront, giving the ACC an energy that we have not seen before.
Josh, you slightly emphasized yet, and I think you're onto something there because you know a whole lot more than me. You cover the conference firsthand, and you were right there and have been in the past. But I saw the conference room type setting with the audience and the rows and rows of media. I saw that kind of look in the backdrop that is much more TV friendly and video friendly than it's been in the past. So definitely the powers that be are thinking forward and setting it up to be that kind of event going forward.
No question about it. Yeah, the event has grown year over year. It's actually now, I think, the 8th or 9th time I've been there in the last 10 years. So you've seen it evolve over time. And yeah, I mean, the network is only now 2 years away from launching, so you can tell that the ACC and ESPN are working together to try and build a bigger and bigger feel every year. And it'll be interesting to see what they do next as the ACC continues to grow, because it's a conference that's clearly on the rise.
Josh, I saw some interviews with Deondre Francois. We know what he accomplished as a freshman, despite some adversity with some issues along the offensive front and really taking a beating. We addressed that the last time we chatted, but very confident in regards to understanding the mission, the task, the expectations, respecting the opponent and the schedule. But at the same time, he feels like he's ready to go and ready to lead this team to big things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lamar Jackson gets all the headlines right now in the preseason as the ACC probably player of the year, definitely player of the year, and the ACC first team quarterback. But Deondre Francois, he's got the better team. And after what he went through last season as a freshman, he's ready for big things this season. Last year, they struggled to the offensive line. He took a beating in a lot of games, starting from opening weekend against Ole Miss, where he just got thrown around for really 4 quarters and somehow managed to keep getting up and give Florida State a chance. They actually won that game. So if Florida State can protect him this season, they've got a ton of weapons around him. They obviously have to go in and play Alabama in week 1 in Atlanta, but Florida State is as good as anybody. And Deondre Francois, I was doing radio yesterday with Michael Felder, who runs In the Bleachers on Twitter, and he thinks Francois is the second best quarterback in the country. So there's a lot of expectation placed on this kid, and we're going to see if he lives up to it.
When you look at Clemson, we know what the program's been in the past, but this is the new elite, right? When you collect that short list of Alabama, Ohio State, USC, and a few others, they've joined the list. I think we can officially put them on the list with the championship. And Dabo Swinney spoke of having the expectations that you can't take a breath and be like, okay, we got that out of the way. No, this is the new standard and expectation that you compete each and every year at this level. They got the facilities in place, the sparkling resources that they've got on campus to show the recruits. So Clemson's completely arrived now.
Oh, they've certainly arrived. I think 2 national championship game appearances in 2 years is enough to mark your place as one of college football's elite. And you mentioned the standard. Best is the standard at Clemson. That's what they say. And personally, I think that Clemson is poised to be the best program, the premier program in all of college football over the next 5 or 10 years, more than Alabama, more than Ohio State, more than anybody else you want to put into that mix. I think they have recruited at a level that matches any school in the SEC or Florida State or anyone in the Big Ten. They obviously have the results on the field, The question now is going to be just replacing Deshaun Watson this season. But if they can replace him, I think they're poised to make another run to the playoff and another potential national championship. There's that much talent on that team, and they have the best coaching staff in the country. They have arguably the best facilities now in the country. There's nothing about Clemson. There's no holes in that program right now. And Nick Saban and Alabama, they're not going anywhere. Florida State's a great program in the ACC. We see what Jim Harbaugh's doing at Michigan. There's a lot of really great programs, but if I have to put my stock and put my money on one program to have the most success in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm putting it on the Clemson Tigers. I really am.
Hey, Josh, when you try to cover these media days from afar, you get the typical sound bites from the podium from the coaches and from the players. And obviously the players are prepped to not say anything too outside of the box. So you get the standard lines. It's nice to hear from them because we haven't had any fresh college football material for the most part since spring practice. But you get the run-of-the-mill stuff. You were there, and maybe even more so from hearing from the coaches and players. You get to talk to beat writers, guys that are inside the program and have a different perspective. So do you have a different thought process or perspective or evaluation of any particular team or player or division or any aspect of what we're going to see this fall that maybe you didn't have a week ago?
You know, it's really hard to try and get a read on any of these programs at media days. You pretty much touched on it right there. I mean, you hit it on the head. These coaches aren't really going to give you a whole lot. They're not going to give you any new insight into the programs. The players are pretty much prepped to not say anything that the coaches or the administrators wouldn't want them to say. So there's really not a lot of new information to learn. But I will say the player who impressed me the most just with his demeanor and his attitude and his focus in speaking with him was Mark Walton, the running back at Miami. We spoke to him yesterday on the radio, and he has a very, very dialed-in mentality right now, and he's ready to prove everybody wrong that Miami is a program that isn't capable of competing with Florida State or competing with Clemson. I think he's sick of hearing that Miami is pretty much playing second banana to the other schools in that state and in the conference. I mean, it's been now 12 years that Miami's been in the ACC. They've still yet to win the Coastal Division. It's likely that they'll be picked by the time this probably comes out. Miami will be picked to win the Coastal. But we've seen that 7 or 8 times in the last 12 years, and not once have they delivered. We asked Mark Walton about that. I told him to his face. I said, look, I'm giving you bulletin board material, Mark. I don't believe in you. I don't think that you guys can do it. Tell me why I'm wrong. And you could just see a very serious – he wasn't upset with me, but you could tell he was very serious in his attitude. And he needs to be a leader because they're not going to get that from the quarterback position, breaking in somebody new and potentially a freshman in N'Kosi Perry. So Mark Walton is going to have to carry a heavy load for Miami, but I was impressed with him speaking to him yesterday at kickoff.
Good stuff right there. A couple of weeks ago, we had our SB Nation guy from Miami, Cam Underwood, on, and we mentioned to him, I did, just wanted to get a little reaction out of him, that SI.com listed its top 100 players in college football, including 12 running backs on the list. No Mark Walton after 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. Cam Akers on the list. Of course, he has yet to lay it down just to fuel the fire.
He wasn't happy about that.
A little bit.
He knows.
And that was definitely it. So we started this discussion, Josh, last time in the Coastal Division. So despite what was done before Mark Richt arrived in recruiting, and then Richt going on a second consecutive top 10 to 15 class there at Miami, you're still not sold that. I don't know if you've made your official pick yet. I'm guessing that that's coming later down the line in August, but you're leaning another direction. That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, I am. I'm not sold on Miami. I think that they're not the only team in the Coastal Division that has a question mark at quarterback. But right now, look, you just said Miami's had a couple great recruiting classes. Miami always has great recruiting classes, and they don't follow through. They have great talent. I think there's so many distractions at the University of Miami outside of the football program that I think you don't have in Blacksburg, Virginia, or even in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or in Chapel Hill. I think that a lot of times those players aren't as emotionally mature as what you see at some of the other schools in that division, and haven't been in the past as well coached. Now, you can argue that Mark Richt is the best coach they've had in a while, but Al Golden was a pretty good coach when he came to Miami. He had a lot of success at Temple, and everybody expected him to turn things around. So just because Mark Richt comes in there with a high pedigree doesn't mean that I think that he's going to have any more success than anybody else did, especially without a quarterback that we know anything about. So I'm not picking Miami to win the division. I liked what Mark Walton had to say to me, and I hope that for his sake that he can lead that team and they have success. I'm certainly not rooting against them, but at the same time, what has Miami done to me to prove that this year is going to be any different than any of the last 10 years? They've had more talented teams than the one they've had this year. They have a great defense. They have a very, very good defense. But in this era, you've got to be able to put points on the board, and you've got to be able to play consistently at a high level week in and week out. And I don't know that I'm going to get that out of Miami this year.
There's a couple conferences, and I'll throw the ACC in this mix. I would throw the Big 12 with the Oklahoma State situation as possibly being a one-game scenario for the entire season. And I just don't like that. It's good for college football in that we're seeing the elites play and that they'll move on to the conference championship and the college football playoff. But can you sell me in any way on this not being just a Clemson-Florida State matchup that's going to determine everything?
It's going to be hard. I mean, I made some predictions yesterday on the radio, and I said, look, I think that Virginia Tech is going to upset Clemson in Blacksburg at the end of September. But I think Clemson's going to beat Florida State in November, and I think that Clemson's going to win the Atlantic. Then I think we're going to see a Virginia Tech-Clemson rematch, and I think Clemson's going to win. I think Virginia Tech getting Clemson early in the season in Lane Stadium, definitely the biggest game of Justin Fuente's tenure there so far. I think Virginia Tech will knock them off in Blacksburg. But by the end of the season, when Clemson has a more stable quarterback situation, they're rolling, they're obviously have an entire season under their belt, they're going to have revenge on their minds, in my opinion. I think Clemson wins the league. I don't see anybody but Clemson or Florida State coming out on top. Louisville, to me, is a little bit young in a lot of areas, and as great as Lamar Jackson was last season, I don't think that they are going to consistently play at the level that a Clemson or Florida State will. So, no, I mean, Clemson or Florida State is going to end up winning this conference. It would be a massive, massive shocker if anybody but one of those two teams came out on top. I wish I could give you some bold prediction, but I'll give you Virginia Tech winning in September, but not when it matters most in December.
No, I just want to know what you think. I'm not looking for any people that go out on a limb just to do it, and then in November when they've got a 1 in 10 shot of saying, "Hey, that was me that picked whoever." Yeah. Josh Parcell, you see him on Twitter. You got to follow him. Got to follow his work. He's got some big things in store coming up. And don't think he's just an ACC guy. This guy knows college football coast to coast. So I'm going to throw this one at you to conclude things, Josh. It was definitely the best conference in the postseason. It was arguably the best conference during the regular season. Before that, I think it was a tussle between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC. But the conference put a stamp on the postseason, not just in the championship game, but elsewhere. Will this be the best conference in 2017?
Probably. Right now, it seems that way. I think the conference that has the best chance to challenge them right now is the Big Ten, because Ohio State's going to be very good, probably a top 5 team to start the season. Michigan is going to be on the fringe of the top 10. And Penn State might be the best team in the Big Ten right now. And for them to have 3 teams that, in my opinion, are probably all top 10 entering the year, that is on par with what the ACC has. Just so happens the ACC, they're all also in all the same division. The Big Ten East and the ACC Atlantic, you put those two together, I mean, that's 6 of the top 10 teams, in my opinion, in college football entering the year. So I think it's neck and neck between those teams. If you look at the rest of those leagues and you stack them up side by side, I would probably lean towards the ACC. I think Virginia Tech and Miami are very strong 4th and 5th teams. So, yeah, I think the ACC, again, they were puffing their chest out all week long in Charlotte at the Westin Hotel. So they're going to have to deliver on that. But I think that the ACC has as good a chance as anybody to be the first conference in the college football playoff era to put 2 teams into that 4-team playoff. I think Florida State and Clemson can get it done this year. The way the schedule lines up, I think there's a lot of factors that they may not be 2 of the 4 best teams. Maybe they are. But you have to look at when do you play your hardest games, when do you lose, and how are you playing at the end of the season when the pollsters are really taking your most recent games into account. So I think this could be a year the ACC sneaks 2 in.
All right, excellent stuff again from Josh Parcell. Join him on Twitter at Josh Parcell, college football writer and personality. Josh, we could talk college football all day, but I'll let it go right there because we've got plenty of football in front of us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Always appreciate having or joining you.